Production. Hello, everybody. I'm Jacqueline Bell, aka Jackie. I'm here to give you guys another fan fiction and chapter 1 of another one. A friend of mine brought up to me saying, "You're reading this story called Wide Awake," which is honestly great fan fiction in my eyes. But she said, "Why not read this other one that you said you really liked?" And I'm like, yeah, that I don't see why not. So, Steve, my friend, you know who you are. Now, I decided to pick this specific one called The Gotham Phantom, which is by WSS 3. It's found on fanfiction.net and it's under the adventure genre, 33 chapters. Let's get to it. Let's just say I restarted this beforehand. Post TUE. This TUE is an acronym meaning the ultimate enemy. If you are not savvy in the abbreviations of D&D fandom, it means it happened after the episode Ultimate Enemy, which is when Dark Danny came to be, and I'm not going to talk more about this. Get to the book. The youngest Fenton just stood there in the rebel, stunned and in disbelief. Before his own baby blue eyes, his family and closest friends were gone. The explosion, Nasty Burger, and his evil future self. His thoughts were in a blaze, and emotions undecipherable. Too much was happening in the young Half's life. It felt like hours, days, eternity. Before he finally heard the sirens of an ambulance and police cars zooming in into the site of the tragedy. In a matter of minutes, fatigue and shock overtook him. Voices. They sound so familiar. Blinking open his eyes, he was a bit shocked to see Mr. and Mrs. Foley, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Manson, all looking at him intently and worriedly. The accident, Sam and Tucker, they were... The first word that he had to say was, "I'm sorry." Sad sapphire orbs looked back on the confused and worried adults in the room. Mrs. Foley was the first to speak as she walked to Danny and hugged him tightly. "Oh, baby, you have no fault in this. You don't need to apologize for anything." Her motherly look made Danny want to just sit there and relax in her comforting arms. The other grown-ups followed, and each one gave the boy a reason to live on. "Samantha was always so depressed with us, but you always made her smile. Both you and Tucker meant the world to her." Mrs. Manson wiped a tear from her already swollen eyes. "Tucker never had such a friend as close to you as you. You were like a brother to him." Danny smiled a little at Mr. Foley's words. Tucker and him had always shared everything. "Finally, we're getting a smile from our little boy," exclaimed Mrs. Manson as she held hands with her husband, who went on, "We were starting to think you were going goth, too." By this time the room was full of laughter despite the recent tragedies. Danny felt okay. "Danny," Mr. Foley stood up, "as you already know, we've all lost someone important to us. The hardest hit was on you, son." Mr. Manson put a reassuring hand on Danny's shoulders as Mr. Foley continued. "We, the Mansons and Foleys, have lost our children, while you have lost both a sister and parents. We talked this over and decided to ask you whether you would accept all four of us as your foster parents." Danny was stunned. He was about to interject when, "And no, Danny, we don't hate you. You were just a child, and the whole thing was an accident waiting to happen." Mrs. Manson added on, "We all knew that what you're through. We all know what you're through, and we all thought it was the best that you get adopted by." Danny practically screamed, I don't want to be adopted by Vlad Masters. Please, Don't worry, honey. We didn't mean him. As much as he is rich and popular, we've all agreed that you're not exactly getting the right vibes from this man." Mrs. Foley interrupted. "Your mother and I talked a lot of things over the phone and had a lot of mother-to-mother chats. I know that Masters is a Fruit Loop." Danny sighed in relief at her words and was chuckling at the last statement. Mrs. Manson continued, "We actually asked someone we trust very much. His father was a close family friend despite the fact that he's a stranger. We're confident you'll be fine." Danny again was about to interrupt, and the reason why we didn't want to adopt you ourselves is because Amity Park will hold too many painful memories for you. Danny was speechless, to say at least. He was relieved that he wasn't going to turn into his future older jerky self, as Sam had put it, but utterly bewildered by the fact that he's getting adopted to a complete stranger. Who is he? Apparently curiosity got over the shock. "Bruce Wayne of Gotham City." A deep baritone voice answered for the parents. A tall, muscular man in a black suit came to Danny's view. Similar to Danny, he had black hair and icy blue eyes. Stretching out a hand to the Mansons and Foleys. "I'm sorry for your loss." The other adults just nodded and smiled sadly as the young billionaire of Gotham. "So this is the young man?" He shifted his blue eyes to Danny's. Those eyes. Danny felt like he knew those eyes. The aura they gave out. The guy reminded him of Clockwork, the wise and ever observant master of time. Hi, Mr. Wayne." He accepted the handshake, which he thought was pretty firm. "Please, call me Bruce. I'm not that old, you know." He gave Danny a grin before letting go of his hand. Danny smiled. He seemed nice. "So, Danny," all the eyes were on him as they waited for his answer. "Okay, I'll go." All four grief-stricken adults huddled around him as he whispered, "Thanks, Mums and Dads." Bruce Wayne stood at the doorway as he watched and observed. He was surprised to say the least when the Mansons called for help. They were a very close friend of his deceased parents, and he remembered them well in childhood. First, he was firmly against the idea of adopting a teenager. But Alfred had been there and thought some unknown and unbelievable way the old man convinced him to say yes. He had a very suspicious feeling that the butler had only wanted him married and settled to have grandkids around the mansion. This incident had further confirmed that theory. The kid seemed okay. Not too tall or short, a bit pale and skinny, but the firm handshake begged to say otherwise. He wasn't weak, according to what he looked up. His parents were professional ghost hunters in the ghost-infested town of Amity Park. No, he wasn't really shocked. He had experience with ghosts before he was even in the Justice League. The town was also famous for its teen ghost hero, Invisible, or as others says, Danny Phantom. He had seen a picture of this hero. His sharp eyes had already noticed the striking similarities in both names and faces between the ghost and the boy before him. Mr. Bruce. Danny would have been unconsciously scratching the back of his head, but Bruce raised an eyebrow at the teen, who, awkwardly unable to stop all the hugging, or in rather accurate terms, suffocating, he gave out a deep chuckle before the dark night and came to his rescue from overly affectionate adults. "You okay?" Bruce glanced at the youth, who was obviously too nervous for what's to come. Danny Finnan tried to stay calm, but he just couldn't. The memories were too fresh, the reminders too much for him. He knows that he'll eventually get over the loss, but for now he was doubtful of the quote, "time heals." Well, he didn't want to act like such a sap in front of Mr. Wayne, a still complete stranger to him. Taking a huge deep breath, he steps into the most peculiar house ever seen in the history of Emily Park. The Fenton residence. He was grateful for the Gotham billionaire's supporting hand on his shoulder right before he walked in. "If you want, I can keep your home maintained, so it'll be safe from renovation and such." Bruce was more than willing to let this house stay as it is. From experience, he knew little changes like this hurt a lot for any kid. Thanks, Bruce. I really appreciate that." Danny was eternally grateful for her that, actually. But common sense told him saying thanks was a better option than hugging the man in front of him. "Would you happen to have a spare basement?" "Well, that was random." Danny shook the thought away as he continued. "If it's not too much trouble, I was kind of wondering if I could move my parents' lab to your place." Batman grinned at the pleading look at the boy's face, raising his hands in surrender. Okay. In exchange, I want you to please avoid any violent experiments. According to what I hear, your parents were quite the inventors, and your English teacher almost became their lab rat." Danny nearly heaved over from laughter in the flashback. "The best part about my parents is that they left a lot of good memories for me. My sister Jess was always criticizing them on their parenting skills, especially on me." "It's good to see you can still smile, Danny. But that tells me that you had a good family." The boy smiled widely. "Go unpack your stuff. I'll handle the transfer of the lab." He turned to leave Danny some privacy. Danny sighed as he took one last look at the kitchen, where he first got hit by the stupidly named boomerang. Taking off to the upstairs, he turned to his own room, where he started to quickly pick out his stuff, packing only the essentials. He began picking out things he thought invaluable. Going to his sister's room, he spots Bearbert. Smiling, he slips it into his duffel bag. In his parents' room, his mom's red-tinted goggles and his dad's large black gloves. Finally, he pockets a photograph of him, Tucker, and Sam in front of their house. He had the same picture in Sam's diary. And Tucker's red beret and PDA, all in the courtesy of his foster parents. He was also completely clueless to the fact that he was the heir to both the Foley and Manson legacy. Checking over all his stuff, he reluctantly leaves the upstairs with his bags and heads to the lab armed with a backpack. In a matter of minutes, he had it filled with the Fenton thermos, Fenton gauntlets, his mom's Fenton utility weapon, the Fenton Fisher, and yes, basically all Fenton weapons small enough to fit in his backpack. Bruce waited patiently at the front porch and was greeted with a familiar beeping. "Bruce here. What's up?" A woman's voice replied. "Diana here. I heard you've gone back to Gotham, but didn't find you there. Where are you, anyway?" Amity Park, the most haunted town of USA, located at Texas. Why do you ask? In a flash of all the colors of America, Wonder Woman came swooping down along with the rest of the League. Isn't this out of protocol? Bruce was obviously unamused. The ever-cheerful speedster adamantly points out, well, we were all curious. Come on, when did you ever leave the Watchtower or Gotham City without having a world-threatening incident in another part of the globe? And I'm going to leave it at there, considering that this episode is getting a little long. Usually I would like to complete a chapter within 15 minutes, and this isn't going to work out. I noticed this. I should have done a test run. Anyway, if you want me to continue with this chapter, please let me know down in the comments. I might still do it anyway because I hate leaving stuff unfinished. And enjoy your day. Jackie out.